So there was a massive Xbox leak that happened overnight, and it just revealed a lot of details for Microsoft's plans, including a new console in 2028, a mid-gen refresh maybe coming as early as next year, a new controller that might have gyro in it, plans for maybe a handheld, and even more importantly, plans to buy Valve and Nintendo. Obviously, these are all just plans, and these are only internal documents that were leaked courtesy of the FTC case, but it really provides a good look of what's going on behind the scenes. It really gives us a chance to peek behind the curtain, and we learned a lot, and so I want to talk about it. I want to talk first about this small story, maybe Microsoft buying Valve. The headline, of course, is Nintendo, because that would be the bigger deal, but down here it says Spencer wrote that Microsoft's board is fully supportive of a bid for Nintendo or PC powerhouse Valve. There are some caveats there, right? Up here it says Microsoft's board of directors was fully supportive of a potential purchase of Nintendo if the opportunity arose, right? The deal here is that Nintendo would have to want to sell. This says Nintendo would have to be a willing participant. Same deal for Valve. I don't imagine that Valve would want to sell. They've been very comfortable being a privately held business and staying that way. They want to be able to do things like leverage open source software and even contribute to open source software with things like Linux, DXVK, and Mango HUD, and more, right? So maybe Nintendo does seem like a better target, but even then it says here, without that catalyst, I don't see an angle to a near-term mutually agreeable merger of Nintendo and MS, and I don't think a hostile action would be a good move, so we are playing the long game. And by the way, I hope that neither of these acquisitions happen, right? Like, I do not want Microsoft to acquire either Nintendo nor Valve. I think both would be pretty much a terrible situation, but it's just really interesting to see how they're thinking about this behind the scenes. And this is another example of that. You can see where they have industry leaders, quote unquote, ranked, and they have an estimated revenue number for Valve, and it's 6.5 billion, which is about the same as Electronic Arts and a little lower than Activision Blizzard. So I think it's interesting to see that number. What do you think of that number? Do you think it's accurate? Do you think it would be impressive if it's true? Yeah, let me know what you think. Let's go to the next one. Of course, like, subscribe. Next up here is that there is a refresh that is planned for the Xbox Series X. This refresh is all digital. Another thing here is that the target launch for this is October 2024. But here's the thing, I don't have an Xbox Series X. The reason I want the Xbox Series X is specifically for the disk drive. I have some old Xbox games, Ninja Gaiden Black, Jet Set Radio Future, Panzer Dragoon Orta, and I would want to play those games on my Xbox Series X, and the only way to do so, considering I only have the disc, is to have a disk drive. So it looks like this wouldn't work for me. In terms of Wi-Fi, it is 6E as you might expect, and Bluetooth is 5.2. They also point out this is a 6 nanometer die shrink, so that's where that extra efficiency comes from. In real numbers, that's about 15% reduced PSU power. All right, so the new controller, there are a few details here. There's a seamless parent switch with the mobile app features, which is nice. You can even see on the mobile app the devices that it's connected to or paired to. But most importantly here, the thing that everybody is focusing on is an accelerometer, which could mean that we get gyro functionality on the Xbox. I would like to see this specifically on the PC, supported by X input or one of Microsoft's APIs. I personally would like to see this on PC using X input or one of Microsoft's various APIs. One of the big problems with having gyro on a Windows PC, or more specifically a Windows handheld, is that it's not supported by X input. So basically the developer would have to use two different APIs, whatever the API is for the accelerometer, as well as X input, the API for the controls. Of course, there's Steam, which tries to provide a bridge for the developer, but Steam only provides support for certain gyro, including DualSense and of course their own Steam controller. So, when you get an Aya Neo with gyro, you still need to sort of mask a DualShock controller or DualSense controller in order to get gyro to work with Steam. Interestingly, Jib Smart, who is a big advocate for gyro gaming, he does say, apropos of nothing, accelerometers aren't gyroscopes and gyroscopes aren't accelerometers. They often come together. They can come separately. For aiming in a game, both together is best. Gyro on its own is very good, and accelerometer on its own is near useless. This, of course, only points out the accelerometer, but presumably it would be both, and so hopefully we would be able to aim with whatever's in here. One thing I didn't point out is the lift to wake. That would be really neat, but of course it probably would not work on PC. Someone needs to get that fixed, please. Yeah, that would be great if that works on PC. And then here we have the timeline for some of these launches. Siebel, the controller, would be launched in late May of 2024 for $69.99. The mid-gen refreshes would be announced in July of 2024, and we only saw the one refresh. This is the Brooklyn, the Xbox Series X refresh, but presumably there's an Elwood, a refresh for Xbox Series S, so that would launch in late August, with Brooklyn close behind in late October. They say 60 plus day separation between launches enables dialogue with different audiences. We're getting a really good behind the scenes look here at how Microsoft is looking at this. The point is, yeah, it gives Elwood some time earlier in the holiday time frame to maximize those sales. The next thing to talk about is this slide, which contains a handheld and some sort of cloud device. Now, this slide is just meant to be sort of a generic, you can play Xbox anywhere, you can play Xbox using any input, right? But what's interesting here is that all of these are sort of iconography, and then they have actual images or renders for these, the cloud device and the handheld. Of course, the consoles make sense, and you can see this one is of Brooklyn, the Xbox Series X refresh. And then again, for high-end PC and Cloud Blade, they have those as sort of iconography or something like that. So yeah, clearly they have thought about handheld work. There's been a lot of sort of discussion about whether or not they would make a handheld. Of course, the Fox, he made a video on whether or not Microsoft could make sort of an Xbox Series H, and of course they could if they wanted to. And he commented on this slide. He said, quite a number of people have sent me this image of MS having a handheld in the lineup. It's 100% possible for this handheld to exist next holiday without using ARM, but by 2028 it'd be even more possible. He also says, if Xbox wants me on stage to help announce, I'm still available. I think I speak for everyone when, yes, we want the Fox to be on stage when Xbox announces their handheld. Absolutely. And here is even more information about what they have planned. So you can see what they've actually have funded, including a wireless headset, the mid-gen console, so Elwood and Brooklyn, that is the Series S and Series X, Gen 10 investigation, so meaning the next generation of consoles, a cloud console, that's Keystone. So Keystone is funded, but what's interesting here is that the handheld is not only not funded, but it's not in scope for first party. So when they're talking about handhelds here, I think really what they're talking about is the ROG Ally, Lenovo Legion Go, and whatever other third-party handhelds come out for Windows. What I would like to see is at the very least, some investment into the handheld experience on Windows operating system. Before I leave the screen here, they do also have some items that are planned but not funded, so repairability / sustainability progress, that is a good sign. The new cloud server blade in accessibility portfolio, again, a really good sign. And one of my favorites here, PC accessories. I'd like to know what PC accessories they do have planned, and some more on controllers and the console customization. So these are some cool plans that they have. I do wish that they were tackling their own first-party handheld. I think that would go a long way, but unfortunately it's not planned, at least as of this slide. So that was the controller, the refresh, maybe a handheld, and plans to buy Nintendo and even Valve. But here is something interesting. Here is sort of the next gen of consoles. Now this is really, really early on. A lot of this may change, but it's just interesting to look at and think about. One of the key things here is that they are considering going with ARM as opposed to x64 or x86. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the considerations of going with ARM, especially as it relates to backwards compatibility. But yeah, I think that's fascinating. They also talk about a possible NPU, so some sort of silicon dedicated towards machine learning workloads as opposed to the typical GPU and CPU workloads. They talk a lot about the different AI possibilities, and I'll cover that briefly, but this is a little bit far off, being sort of 2028, so I'm not going to cover this in too much depth. They also refer to having thin operating system for less than $99. This is for consumer or handheld devices. So yeah, I think the most important things when it comes to maybe a next generation console are that, number one, they are considering using ARM. Number two, they do want sort of a machine learning targeted workload. And number three, they are considering some sort of thin OS solution. I think those are really important. By the way, this slide was presented in October 2022, so less than a year ago. So in essence, this should be accurate information, at least to that point. By the way, these posts are from Resetera, so definitely check out resetera.com, the forums, for some discussion about this topic. Also from that forum is how they would do backwards compatibility. If you want to do backwards compatibility from OG Xbox and Xbox 360 and Xbox Series and Xbox One, if you want to pull all those games into Xbox Gen 10, then you're going to need some sort of translation layer. That is what Apple is doing with their new game porting toolkit. So maybe Microsoft can do something like this as well. There's also the mention here of hybrid compute. So hybrid compute meaning perhaps doing both ARM and x86. The problem with that, as this poster points out, is that developers may have a problem with this if Sony and PC are not doing the same thing. If Sony and PC are all doing the same thing as Xbox, then developers can target sort of one broad architecture like hybrid compute. But if Sony and PC are not doing this, then developers have their work cut out for them, and it may mean worse ports for Xbox. And that's why a lot of this is still very early, right? A lot of this may change, a lot of this may evolve as the technology evolves. We're going to see what happens, but it's just interesting to see what Microsoft has planned, at least as of October 2022. All right, as for those machine learning workloads, some of what they talked about is not terribly surprising. Some of it is already happening, right? Like super resolution, so something like DLSS. There's also a frame rate interpolation, which is, yeah, that's already being worked on and already happening. Interestingly, over here is AI game testing. Now, there are a lot of options for automated QA in game development and software development. Now, AI would be a level on top of that. It's interesting. I don't know sort of what the use case for this would look like today, especially in game development, but I'm curious to see how that progresses and how current QA developers can use AI game testing. I don't know if it would be helpful or not. And then, of course, AI could be helpful for like identifying toxic messages and things like that. So that also kind of leads into a privacy question with AI sort of reviewing the messages that get sent, especially voice messages, things like that. I'd be curious to see how this all gets handled. And yeah, interesting here. They want to use AI for, of course, for you, right? To optimize you giving Microsoft money, right? Monetization improvement, engagement and retention management. So that's interesting. Not something that I would advocate for, but this is something that it's not surprising that Microsoft would be targeting in some way. And finally, we need to talk about the games, right? So down here, starting around here, we see some planned titles that we may not have known about and some that we did. So the Oblivion remaster is a big one. This was sort of leaked on Reddit, and I think some people didn't believe this, but yeah, it looks like it is happening. If I recall correctly, this remaster is being done by a studio that is doing the Metal Gear Solid 3 remake. Some of the other things here are no surprise, right? The Elder Scrolls Online expansion and Starfield DLC. That's something that you would expect to come. We've already seen quite a bit about the Indiana Jones game from the Bethesda studio that made the Wolfenstein games. And then here in the next fiscal year, there is Doom Year Zero. So I'm interested to know what that is exactly. Another Elder Scrolls Online expansion and Project Platinum. I don't know what that is. You know, Platinum is one of my favorite game development studios, and Microsoft and Platinum were working on a game called Scalebound a long time ago, but that was before the Bethesda acquisition, and all of these games here are Bethesda games. So I don't know if this is a game with Platinum Studios or if this just has the name Platinum just because. In any case, the fiscal year after that contains Elder Scrolls 6, Fallout 3 Remaster, Ghostwire Tokyo sequel, which is surprising, and Dishonored 3, as well as DLC for that Doom Year Zero. These are some interesting games coming from Bethesda. Obviously, Elder Scrolls 6, it would be surprising if this actually makes it to fiscal year 24, but obviously a lot of people are really excited for that. remastering Fallout 3, that makes perfect sense, but Ghostwire Tokyo getting a sequel, that would be surprising if it actually happens. But really, I think the one that is a surprise that everyone's excited for would be Dishonored 3. Getting another game in the Dishonored franchise would be tremendous. In any case, yeah, there was a lot in these leaks, and there is a lot more to find. I know people are going to be data mining those leaks for some time. A lot of those documents have been removed from the court document database that they were accessible in. I'm sure people downloaded those files, and we'll find out more as people do some digging. But I think the interesting things for me is that, yeah, Microsoft has their eyes on Nintendo and Valve and would like to maybe purchase them one day far in the future. We are, of course, getting refreshes for Xbox Series S, Xbox Series X, but there is a new controller coming, possibly with Gyro, and possibly some more PC accessories. They are taking into account handhelds, but we may not see a first-party handheld anytime soon. And finally, that the next gen of Xbox is looking really focused on cloud gaming, AI gaming, maybe ARM. So there's a lot of interesting things that may be happening. But yeah, of course, I'm going to be looking forward to the games, including Elder Scrolls 6, Fallout 3 Remaster, and whatever Project Platinum is, and of course, Dishonored 3. Let me know if there are any bombshells in this leak for you, and let me know if there are any titles here that you're looking forward to. Outside of that, I hope you're having a wonderful week. Deck Gang out. Goodbye.